Welcome back to Inside the Philippines Journals. If you're new here, this is the channel where men who went looking for a second chance in these islands sit down and tell you, honestly, what it costs them. Not the postcard version, the real one. The man you're going to hear from today is called Terry. He's 57, from Glasgow, and he spent the better part of 30 years behind the wheel of an articulated lorry, up and down the motorways of Britain in the dark and the rain. A divorce took most of what he had, years back, and it left him with a very particular kind of stubbornness. He decided that, whatever else happened in his life, no one was ever getting their hands on his money again. He was so sure of that. He did everything he thought a careful man was supposed to do. He asked for the paperwork. He drew a line, and he swore he'd never cross it. And that's really why his story is worth your time. Because Terry didn't lose his money by being reckless. He lost it by being careful about the wrong thing. He guarded one door with everything he had, and never once thought to look at the window. Before we get into it, if you've ever been out here, or you're dreaming about it, or you're just watching from your kitchen at 2 in the morning like a lot of you tell me you are, do us a favor. Leave a comment and say where you're watching from. Share your own story if you've got one, because someone in these comments needs to read it. And if these stories mean anything to you, subscribe, so the next fella gets his warning in time. Here's his story, in his own words. The thing you have to understand about me is that I'd already been cleaned out once, and I'd built my whole personality around never letting it happen again. Her name was Sheila. Married her when I was 26, and for a long while it was grand. A wee house in Bearsden, a garden, the whole picture. I was away a lot, mind. That's the job. You're a shape in the doorway at odd hours, and a name on the mortgage the rest of the time. 30 years I drove for the same haulage firm out of Glasgow, running chilled goods up to Aberdeen and down to the depots in the Midlands, sleeping in a cab in laybys off the M74. You miss things, doing that. Christmases, school plays. You tell yourself you're missing them for a good reason, for the family. And then one day, the family's a lawyer's letter on the mat, and you realize you missed them for nothing. She met somebody else. That's the short version. The long version cost me the house, half a pension I'd broken my back paying into, and about 11 years of walking about with a face like a burst couch. The courts in Scotland don't mess about. I walked out of that marriage with a hold-all, a Ford Mondeo, and a rage I couldn't put down. 50-odd years old and starting again from a bedsit in Govan with a kettle, a telly, and a view of somebody else's wheelie bins. I'll tell you the moment it turned in me, because it matters for the rest. It was the day in the solicitor's office when they read out what she was getting and what I was keeping, and I did the sums in my head the way you do driving, mile after mile, and I realized that 30 years of my life came down to a number, and the number was going to her. And the fella across the table, her fella, her solicitor, he wasn't cruel about it. That was the worst of it. He was polite, businesslike, like he was reading out a shopping list. And I sat there in my one good jacket that didn't fit right anymore, and I thought, that's it then. That's what a man is. A house, a pension, a car. Take those away, and what's left of you fits in a hold-all. I didn't get over it. I want to be straight about that, because a lot of these stories are told by men pretending they were fine before the Philippines, and then some woman ruined them. I wasn't fine. I was a bitter, closed-up article for the best part of a decade. I drank more than I should. I fell out with my brother over something so daft, I can't even remember what it was. I'd sit in laybys off the M74 at 3 in the morning with a flask of tea gone cold, and I'd think about Sheila in what used to be my kitchen, and I'd feel the anger come up my throat like heartburn. That was my company for years. That anger. It's not a good roommate, but it's a loyal one. And I made myself a promise in that bed-sit. Daft as it sounds. I said out loud, to the wall, "No woman is ever getting a penny of mine again. I'll be nice as you like, I'll take somebody dancing, but the money stays mine, and the paperwork stays tight." I actually felt clever about it. That was my big lesson from Sheila, I thought. Protect the money. Get it in writing. Now, here's where it turned. A couple of years after the divorce, the firm offered redundancy to the older drivers. My back was gone anyway. 30 years of that seat, my knees like a bag of spanners. And I took it. Took the payout, took my works pension early, about £650 a month, and between that and the redundancy, and a wee bit my mother left me when she passed, I had, all in, a bit over £40,000 to my name. That was it. That was the whole of what I'd salvaged from a life. £40,000 and a works pension and a bed-sit. My mother dying was the thing that knocked me sideways, if I'm honest. She was the last one who phoned me. After she went, I'd sit in that flat of an evening, and the silence had a weight to it. I'd talk to the telly. I'd go for a pint on my own and come back to nobody. You can only do that for so long before something in you starts casting about for a lifeline. The lifeline, God help me, was a fella called Davy. Drove alongside me for 15 years. Davy'd taken his own redundancy and buggered off to Cebu in the Philippines, married a lassie called Amy, and every time I saw him on the Facebook, he was grinning on a beach with a San Miguel in his fist, looking 20 years younger than me. He rang me one night. I was eating a ham sandwich, too much mayo, standing at the sink, and he said, "Terry, what are you doing sitting in Govan waiting to die? Get on a plane, come and see it." I told him he was havering. I said I wasn't one of these sad old men who goes chasing wee girls halfway across the world. And I meant it. I did. But I put the phone down, and I looked round that bedsit. The one plate, the one mug, the damp on the ceiling. And I thought, what exactly am I protecting here? What's the money for, if all it does is sit in an account keeping me company better than people do? I want to be honest with you, because that's the only reason to do this. I didn't go out there for love. I went out there because I was lonely and angry, and I wanted to feel like a man again instead of a court judgment with legs. I told myself it was a holiday. 2 weeks. Sunshine, cheap beer, see Davy, get a bit of color in my face, come home. I even said to myself on the plane, "Wallet stays shut, Terry. You're just looking. You're not daft." I booked the flights. Glasgow to Cebu, the long way round through Dubai. 14 hours of my knees screaming and a ween kicking my seat. And the whole way there, I was pleased with myself, honestly, because I thought I'd learned the lesson. I thought the danger was that some woman would marry me and take me to the cleaners like Sheila did, and I had that covered. No marriage, no cleaning out. Simple. I'd cracked it. That's the bit that makes me want to laugh and be sick at the same time now. I got on that plane thinking I understood exactly where the risk was. I had it pinned to the wall. Marriage. That was the enemy. Keep the ring off and keep the money safe. I had no notion, none, that a man can hand over everything he owns and never sign a single thing. That you don't need a wedding to be robbed blind. You just need to be lonely and generous and sure, dead sure, that you're the smart one in the room. I was 55 years old, and I thought I was the smart one in the room. Away and laugh. Cebu hits you like opening an oven. You come down the steps onto the tarmac at Mactan, and the heat just wraps round your throat. I'd never known humidity like it. Glasgow rain gets into your bones, but this got into your lungs. By the time Davy found me in the arrivals hall, I'd sweated through my good shirt, and I was gawping at everything like a bairn. He drove me into the city in a wee pickup, horn going the whole way, and I couldn't take it in. The jeepneys all painted up like carnival floats, packed to the doors, folk hanging off the back, the tricycles buzzing about like wasps, whole families on one motorbike, Da driving, Ween on the tank, Mammy behind with a baby, nobody wearing a helmet, everybody laughing. Sorry stores every 20 yards selling single cigarettes and sachets of shampoo through a wee grill. Basketball courts down every lane with barefoot laddies playing till dark. And the smell of it, diesel and charcoal and something sweet frying, and under it all the sea. Davy and Emmy put me up in their spare room in Lapu-Lapu. And for the first few days it was exactly the holiday I'd promised myself. San Miguel, that cost about £1 a bottle. Lechon, that's the roast pig, that near made me weep, it was that good. Emmy's family, treating me like visiting royalty. This big daft Scotsman, feeding me till I couldn't move. I felt myself unclench for the first time in years. I actually slept. Davy'd changed, and all. That struck me. Back home he'd been a grey-faced, miserable article same as me, 40 years of night shifts written on his face. And here he was, brown as a nut, up at 6 to walk on the beach, playing with Emmy's nieces and nephews like a big daft granda. He said to me over a red horse one night. He said, "Terry, back home I was just waiting." That's all it was. Waiting for the end and filling in the time. Out here I've got a reason to get up. And I looked at him, and I wanted what he had so badly. It was like a hunger. I didn't examine it. I should have. Because a hunger that big will believe anything that offers to feed it. He did warn me, mind. I'll give him that. And I'll give it to him now so nobody thinks he sold me a pup. He said, "Watch yourself with the money, Terry." He said, "There's good women here, and there's women who'll bleed you white and smile doing it. And the hard part is, they can look exactly the same for a good long while." He said, "Whatever you do, don't build anything. Don't buy anything. Don't put money into land. Because you can't own the land, and the day you forget, that is the day you're finished." I nodded along. I thought he was talking about other men. Softer men. Not me, the careful one. The one who'd already been burned and learned. I heard the warning as a story about somebody else. That's a thing I've noticed about warnings. You always hear them as being about somebody else. It was Emmy that introduced me to joy. And I want to be careful telling this bit, because it would be easy to make it sound like a setup, like a con with a start whistle. It didn't feel like that. It felt like the most natural thing in the world. Her name was Jocelyn, but everybody called her Joy. She was 33. I'll not pretend I didn't clock the years between us, 22 of them. I clocked it, and I chose to look past it. And she worked as a sales lady in a shop up in Ayala Center, Cebu, that big gleaming mall that could be anywhere in the world till you step back outside into the heat. She was a cousin of Emmy's, or a cousin of a friend, the way everybody out there is connected to everybody. Emmy said, "Come, we'll have merienda. That's the wee afternoon meal." And Joy came along after her shift, still in her work blouse. She wasn't a stunner. I'll say that plain, because the honest ones never are a fairy tale. She had a gap in her front teeth and a laugh too big for her, and when she found out I drove lorries, she wanted to know everything. Was it cold in Scotland? Did I ever crash? Was it true it stayed dark till the afternoon in winter? She listened like what I said mattered. Do you know how long it had been since somebody listened to me like what I said mattered? I couldn't have told you. Years. since before Sheila left, probably. She had a wee lassie, an aging thing of 6 called Angel, back in the province with her mother. Father long gone, never married him. He was off to Manila before the wean could walk, and never sent a peso. Joy said it plain, no drama, just a fact of her life. And something in me softened at that, because there's 2 people abandoned, aren't there? Her and the wean. I knew a bit about being left holding nothing. The 2 weeks stretched. I saw her 3, 4 more times. Never on my own, always Emmy about, always proper. A meal at a mang inasal, grilled chicken and unlimited rice, her showing me how to mix the sauce. A walk along the sea-wall in Lapu-Lapu of an evening when it cooled. Nothing happened. I want you to understand. No money, no promises, nothing that would have set an alarm off in even a suspicious man. And I was a suspicious man. That was the thing. She never asked me for a bean. Not one. When I tried to pay for everybody at the Mang Inasal, she got embarrassed and tried to put her own 100 pesos in. This lassie earning buttons, trying to pay her share. I remember thinking, well, that's not what I was warned about. That's the opposite of what I was warned about. And that's exactly it, isn't it? That's how it gets past a man like me. I was braced for a hand in my pocket. I was watching for the grab. Nobody grabbed. So I put my guard down, because I thought the guard was for grabbers. And here was a woman who wouldn't take a free plate of chicken off me. The night before I flew home, she came to Davies to say goodbye, and she got a bit teary at the door, and she said, I'll never forget it. She said, Terry, you are a good man. I can see it. You have a sad face, but a good heart. And I stood there in Davies' doorway, 55 years old, this great lump of a lorry driver, and I felt my throat go. On the plane home, I told myself all the sensible things. You're a fool, Terry. She's half your age. You've known her a fortnight. Get a grip. But I'd swapped messengers with her, and somewhere over India my phone had a good morning message waiting when we landed in Dubai, with a wee son and a wee heart, and I read it about 40 times. I was home in Govan 3 days when I started looking at flights back. I didn't tell Davy. I didn't tell anybody. I sat in that bedsit with the damp on the ceiling, and I thought, what's the harm in going back for a proper look? I'm careful. I'm the careful one. Remember? I've got it all worked out. We texted every single day. That's what did the slow work on me, the daily drip of it. Good morning with a wee son. Photos of her plate at lunch. Angel's report card from school. The wean beaming with a certificate. Joy on a video call of an evening, tired after her shift. The fan going behind her, asking how my day was when my days were nothing. 4 walls and the telly. For a man who'd had silence for company for years, a phone that lit up with somebody's face was a drug. I'll not dress it up. It was a drug, and I was gulping it down. I went back after 3 months. Told myself it was a fortnight again. Stayed 5 weeks. And this time, it was just us, more or less. She took her leave from the shop, and she took me to meet her family. Down in the province in the south of Cebu, a couple of hours on a rattling bus past Karkar, where the roads get thin and the mountains come down to the sea. Her barangay was up a dirt track off the coast road. A scatter of houses, some concrete, some just timber and bamboo with iron roofs, chickens and dogs everywhere, a basketball hoop nailed to a coconut tree. Her mother's house was 3 rooms for what seemed like 9 people, and they gave me the good chair and the good cup, and they killed a chicken they couldn't spare, and I knew they couldn't spare it, and it near broke me. That's the thing nobody warns you about, right? It's not the greed that gets you. It's the kindness. I sat in that wee house with the heat pressing down and the ceiling fan not quite reaching, and Angel, this 6-year-old, climbed up on my knee and fell asleep on my chest. And Joy's mother, Nane, they call the mother, held my hand in both of hers and said something in Bisaya I couldn't follow. And Joy translated it as, "She says, thank you for making my daughter smile. We thought she would be alone." And I sat there with a sleeping wean on my chest, and I thought, I would burn that bedsit in Govan to the ground before I'd go back to it. I want to paint that place for you properly, because it's where the money went and you should see it. It was up a track that turned to red mud in the rains, past a chapel no bigger than a bus shelter with a painted Santo Niño in it, past the basketball court that was really just a hoop and a patch of flattened dirt, where every laddie in the barangay played till the light went. The houses got poorer the further up you went, and Joy's mother's was near the top, concrete to about waist height, and then timber and woven bamboo above that, an iron roof held down with old tires, and a wee cooking fire out the back where Nane made rice. There was a pig in a pen, and a dozen chickens, and a dog with a bad leg, and there was always somebody's radio going, or somebody's karaoke, some auntie murdering a Whitney Houston song 3 houses down at 10 in the morning. And they had nothing, and they shared all of it. That's not me being sentimental, that's a fact. There was a fiesta on while I was there, the barangay's Saints' Day, and they'd saved up all year for it, and they killed the pig, and the whole street ate, and they sat me at the head of the table and wouldn't let my glass go empty. Tanduay rum and coke in a plastic cup, warm, and old men wanting to shake my hand, and Joy laughing with her cousins, and Angel showing me off to the other weens like I was a prize she'd won at the fair. I sat in the middle of all that noise and color and generosity, and I thought, this is what I was cheated of. A big, loud family that wanted me at the table. I never had weens. My own family shrank to my mother, and then to nobody. And here was a whole tribe of people opening the door. You cannot cost that. That's the trouble. You cannot put a price on being wanted at a table when you've eaten alone for 11 years. And because you can't put a price on it, you'll pay any price at all for it, and call it cheap. The first money was nothing. I want to walk you through it exactly, because this is how it happens, and it never happens the way the warnings say. Nanay had a bad turn. Her gallbladder, it turned out, and needed to go to the hospital in Cebu City. And there's no free health service out there. You pay up front, or you don't get seen. It came to about 60,000 pesos all in, the operation and the stay. That's around 850 pounds. And I paid it. Of course I paid it. What kind of a man sits in the good chair, eating the chicken they couldn't spare, and then lets the old woman suffer over 850 quid he'll not even miss? Joy cried and said she'd pay me back from her wages. And she meant it. She tried to. She gave me 1,000 pesos the next month, 14 pounds, all folded up. And I gave it back to her and told her not to be daft. You see what I'm telling you? Every single step made sense. Every one. If you'd been sitting beside me, you'd have done the same, or you're a harder man than you think. We were properly together after that trip. Boyfriend and girlfriend. At my age, God love us. And I made a decision on the flight home that I thought was a wise one. The wisest, canniest thing a burned man could do. I thought, right, I'm not going to just hand this woman money. I'm not a mug. I'm going to set her up so she doesn't need to hand-to-mouth it in that shop for buttons. I'm going to give her a business. Something of her own. Independence. That way, it's not charity, it's not a leash, it's a leg up, and it's good for her, and it takes the worry off. A sari store. Every barangay's got them. The wee shop out the front window selling rice and oil and Milo and cold Coke and load for your phone. Joy had it all worked out, and I loved that she had it worked out. The discarte of her. The hustle. She needed stock and shelving and a chest freezer for cold drinks and ice and a bit of concrete work to open up the front of her mother's house into a proper shop front. It came to about 250,000 pesos by the time it was done. 3,500 pounds. Near enough. Now, here's the part one need you to hear, because it's the whole thing in miniature, and I walked into it with my eyes open and a big satisfied smile on my face. The shop had to be in her name. Of course it did. I'm a foreigner. I can't own a business like that out there, not a wee barangay store, not without a whole company structure that'd cost more than the shop. And I remember thinking about it, actually turning it over, being the careful man, and I thought, that's fine. That's grand, in fact. It should be in her name. It's hers. That's the whole point, isn't it? I'm giving it to her. I gave her 3,500 pounds of my 40, and I felt good about it. Righteous, even. I'd found a way to be generous that was smart. And every warning I'd ever set myself was about a woman taking my money. And this wasn't taking. This was me giving, freely, cleverly. So it didn't count. It didn't count. That's what I told myself about every pound after that. It doesn't count, because I'm choosing it. A man can't be robbed of what he's handing over with a smile. The store did well at first. That was the poison in it, if you like. It worked. I'd come out for weeks at a time, and I'd sit on a plastic stool in the shade, watching Joy serve the neighbors. Angel doing her homework on the freezer lid, Red Horse cold in my hand, and I'd think, this is it. This is the life Davy found. This is what I was owed after everything. I started staying 2 months at a stretch. Cebu stopped being a holiday and started being home, and Govan started being the cold place I visited to sort my pension and my post. I learned the rhythm of the place, the roosters that start at 4 and don't care that they're a day early, the rain that comes down like somebody upended a bath and then stops just as sudden, and the whole street steams, the way you buy your load for your phone in 20 peso top-ups from the same wee window you buy a single cigarette and a sachet of coffee. The habal-habal down to the coast road, that's the motorbike taxi. Me a great lump on the back, with my knees round the driver's ears. I got fond of it. I got fond of all of it. And that fondness was real. I want that on the record. Because when it all came apart, the easy thing would be to say none of it was real. And that's a coward's way of telling it. It was real. That's what makes it hurt. And here's the thing I turn over a lot. Everybody knew, in that barangay, exactly what I was. I was the Kano, the white man. It's not an insult. It's just a fact of the arithmetic. A foreigner is assumed to be rich, because compared to them I was rich. A man on a works pension from Glasgow was a millionaire up that muddy track. I'd catch the aunties totting me up with their eyes, friendly as anything, but totting me up. And instead of that, putting me on my guard, it flattered me. After 11 years of being nobody, of being a court judgment with legs, being somebody's fortune, somebody's answered prayer, I liked it. God help me, I liked being the rich man for once. That's the vanity that empties your account faster than any con. Not wanting the woman, wanting to be the big man who could fix things. The monthly support crept in the way water gets into a boot. It wasn't a demand, ever. It was Angel needing shoes for school, and the uniform and the projects. There's always a project, always a contribution for the fiesta, always a cousin's tuition. It started at about 10,000 pesos a month, £140, which to me was nothing, and to them was the difference between rice and no rice. Then it was 15,000. Then a bit more when Nane's medicine became a regular thing. I set up a standing thing on the Wise app, and honestly, half the time, I didn't look at it going out. £200 a month, roughly, near the end. Month after month after month. And her brother, Jomar, a good enough laddie, no work, none. There's just no work out there for a young fella. He wanted to drive a tricycle for a living, and that needs a tricycle. And a second-hand one came to about 85,000 pesos, £1,200. Joy didn't ask me directly. That's the craft of it. And I don't even know if it was craft or just how they are. She just talked about Jomar being idle, and idle laddies getting into trouble, and how a tricycle could be the making of him, and she'd sigh. And I'm sitting there with £1,200 in the bank that I'd not miss, and a laddie's whole future, apparently, hanging on it. So I bought the tricycle. In Jomar's name, naturally. Everything in somebody's name. Never mine. And I still thought that was me being safe. Do you see it yet? I didn't. That's the thing. I was in it up to my neck, and I still thought the danger was somewhere off in the future, wearing a wedding dress, because here's what was in my head the whole time, humming away underneath. I've not married her. I've not signed anything. Sheila got me through a marriage, through the courts, through a certificate. And I've got no certificate. So whatever I spend, I'm safe. Because there's no legal thread connecting my money to this woman. If it all goes wrong, I just stop. I close the wallet, and I get on a plane. I'm free. I'm the careful one. I actually used to comfort myself with that, lying in the heat at night, with Joy asleep beside me, and the roosters starting up at 4 in the morning, and the karaoke from 3 houses down finally packing in. I'd think, "You've been clever this time, Terry. You've had all the good of it and signed none of the bad. You're not the mug you were at 26. There was one wee thing, early, that I should tell you, because it should have been a splinter in my mind, and I let it heal over. About a year in, I mentioned marriage myself, half joking, testing the water. And Joy went quiet, and then she smiled and said, 'Of course, someday,' and changed the subject to what we were having for dinner. I thought she was being modest, shy. It never once crossed my mind that a woman might not be in a hurry to marry the man whose money already flowed to her freely without a ring. Because why would she change an arrangement that gave her everything and cost her nothing? I think about that quiet a lot now, the way she changed the subject. Should have asked more questions, didn't. It was about 18 months in that the house came up, and that's the one. That's the big one. That's where the real money went. And I want you to watch how a careful man talks himself into it. Joy's mother's house was falling down. Rainy season, it leaked like a colander. The timber was going, and there were, 7 or 8 of them under that iron roof. And it started the way these things always started with us. Not as a request, but as a worry, spoken out loud where I could hear it. Nane's getting older. The house is not safe. If only there was a proper house on the family's land up the hill. Concrete, dry, a house that would last. The family had land. That was the thing that made it feel real, feel solid, like an investment and not a hole to pour money into. A decent-sized plot up the slope behind the barangay. coconuts on it, a view down to the sea, and it had been in Joy's family for generations. Titled, even, which is rarer than you'd think out there. And I stood on that plot one evening with the sun going down orange over the water, and Joy beside me and Angel running about in the long grass, and I thought, I could build something here, something that outlasts me, a man with no weans of his own, and a bedsit in Govan, and here's a chance to put something real into the world, a home for a family that took me in. Now, I knew the law. I want that on the record. I'd read the forums. I'm not a complete idiot. A foreigner cannot own land in the Philippines. Full stop. Not on family land, not any land. No clever workaround that actually holds. So the house I was proposing to pay for, on land I could never own, would be, in every legal sense, entirely hers. Or her family's. Not a brick of it mine. And here is the exact moment, the hinge of the whole thing, and I remember it, like it's burned in. I sat in a Jollibee and car with a coffee going cold, doing the sums on a napkin, and I thought about the risk. And the risk my brain landed on, the only risk, the one I'd been trained by Sheila to see, was, what if we split up after we're married and she takes the house in a settlement? That was my worry, a divorce settlement, on a house. So I decided, right there in the Jollibee, that I would protect myself the smart way. I would agree to build the house, and I would marry her, finally, properly, get the marriage visa, do it right. But only if she signed a prenuptial agreement first. An agreement that said, in black and white, that this house and my pension and my savings were mine, and that if it ever ended, she couldn't take me to the cleaners the way the courts in Scotland did. I was so proud of that plan. Do you understand? I sat in that Jollibee grinning at my own napkin. I thought I'd squared the circle. I'd get the house, the family, the life, and I'd have the paperwork this time. The paperwork I never had with Sheila. I'd finally, at 56 years of age, be the careful man who protected his money with a legal document. The house came to 2.2 million pesos to build. I sat and worked it out, converted it, and it came to about 30,000 pounds. 30,000. 3/4 of everything I had left in the world. Everything I'd salvaged from a whole working life. And I was going to hand it over onto land I couldn't own. But it was fine, you see, because I was going to get a prenup. That was the plan. Money guarded. Line drawn. I even rang Davy about it. And this is the part 1,000 most ashamed of, because he told me straight, and I didn't listen. I said, Davy, I'm going to build a house down the family's land in the south. And there was a silence on the line, a long one, and then he said, Terry, don't. Just don't. Whatever's in your head to do, don't do that one. He said, you'll not own it. You'll never own it. You cannot own it. And the day it goes sour, you'll be a man standing outside a beautiful house he paid for that belongs to somebody else. He'd seen it happen to 2 fellas he knew. One of them, he said, ended up sleeping on a mate's couch in Mandaue, while his ex-girlfriend rented out the house he'd built to backpackers. And do you know what I said to him? I said, aye, but I'm getting a prenup. And Davy laughed. Not a nice laugh. He said, a prenup on what, Terry? You're not getting married. And even if you were, a prenup's for splitting a marriage. It's not for a house that was never yours to split. And I got the hump with him, actually got annoyed, because he was standing between me and the thing I wanted. And I told myself he was just a bitter old expat who'd forgotten what it was to feel something. I hung up on my oldest friend because he told me the truth. That's how far gone I was. So I asked her, I sat Joy down, and I explained it, gentle as I could, that where I come from, people sign these things, that it wasn't that I didn't love her, that it was because of what happened to me before, that I'd been hurt, and I needed to feel safe. She didn't shout. I almost wish she had. She just looked at me like I'd slapped her. And she said, very quiet, "So this is what you think of me. After everything, you think I am like your ex-wife. You think I am with you for money." And her mother got wind of it, and the family, and the temperature in that barangay dropped 10 degrees. It became a thing about respect and trust and about God. A good Catholic woman doesn't sign a paper planning for a marriage to fail before it's begun. That's not faith. That's an insult. That's inviting the devil in. Joy cried and said, if I loved her, I wouldn't need a piece of paper. She said, in Scotland maybe love is a contract, but here love is love. And I dug my heels in. I did. I was proud of digging my heels in. I said, no prenup, no wedding. That's my line and I'll not cross it. I remember thinking, this is it. This is the moment I get right what I got wrong with Sheila. I held firm. I refused to marry her without the paper. She refused to sign. I refused to marry. And I sat on the bus back to the city that night thinking I'd won. I'd protected myself. I'd finally been the strong, careful man. I felt good. Here's what she did next, and it's so simple it's almost funny. She didn't leave. She didn't fight. She just stayed. Girlfriend, not wife. Everything exactly as it was. The support, the store, the visits, and the house. Well, the house was still leaking. Nane was still getting older. And nothing about my refusing to marry her changed a single thing about the money, because the money was never going through a marriage in the first place. I still built the house. Of course I did. I'd said no to the wedding, but I'd never said no to the house. And somehow in my head, those were two different things. It went up over the next year. I paid it in stages, Gcash and Wise, 200,000 here, 300,000 there, watching a concrete box rise on land with my name on nothing. 2.2 million pesos, 30,000 pounds, near enough, gone into it. And I stood in the finished house, and it was lovely. Tiled floors, and a proper kitchen, and a bedroom for Angel. And Nane wept, and thanked God, and thanked me, and I felt like a king. The 500th protected my money by refusing to marry. And I'd built my family a home, and I didn't feel the two things grinding against each other at all. I couldn't feel it. That's the thing about being had. You can't feel it from the inside. It feels like being generous. It feels like being loved. I want to be fair to her, even now, so I'll say this. I don't think it was all a performance. I think Joy was fond of me. I think Angel loved me. Genuine. The wean did nothing wrong. I think Nanai's thanks were real. But I also think that to that family I was, first and foremost, the way out of poverty they'd been praying for. And both of those things were true at once. And I couldn't hold them both. So I only held the nice one. The cold started small. Nothing you could point at. She was slower to answer the phone. The video calls got shorter, and she'd be doing something else the whole time. When I was out there, she'd be off with her cousins more, or tired, always tired, and the money kept going. I was down to about 7,000 or 8,000 pounds by this point, from over 40. I did notice that. I noticed it the way you notice a noise in the engine you'd rather not stop and look at. I flew back to Govan for 6 weeks to sort my own affairs. My pension, my post, my empty bedsit. And while I was there, 5,000 miles away, the calls got so thin I could feel the cold coming down the line like a draft under a door. She was busy. The signal was bad. Angel was sick. Then Angel was fine. Then Nane was sick. And I sat in that damp flat with my telly and my kettle, 7,000 pounds to my name, and a house I couldn't own on the other side of the world, and something at the back of my neck finally stood up. So I did something I'd never done. I didn't tell her I was coming. I told her I couldn't afford the flight this time, made a wee show of being skint, and then I booked it anyway. Dubai, Mactan, the whole 14 hours. I don't even know what I thought I'd find. I think I just wanted to walk into my own life without it having time to arrange itself for me first. I landed in Cebu on a Saturday, tired to the bone, and instead of getting the bus south to the barangay, I stopped in the city because Emmy had texted me, "Davies, Emmy, something odd, a wee thing, just, are you in Cebu?" I saw Joy at the mall, and I thought I'd surprise Joy, take her for a nice meal. This'll be romantic. The daft big man flying in unannounced. I went to SM Seaside, that great enormous mall out on the Reclamation, air conditioning like a slap after the heat outside. And I was walking down towards the food court, rehearsing her face lighting up when she saw me. And I saw her first. She was at a table outside a coffee place. Angel was there, in a wee dress I didn't recognize, eating an ice cream. And across from Joy, leaning in, laughing at something she'd said with his hand over hers on the table, was a man, big fella, older than me even, gray, sunburnt across the scalp, 60-odd, a foreigner, American by the flag on his cap, new-looking shirt, new-looking watch, and Joy was laughing that laugh that was too big for her, the one I'd flown 14 hours for, and she was pouring it all over this stranger the exact way she'd once poured it over me. I didn't storm over. I want you to know that. I didn't make a scene. One just stood there behind a pillar with my bag over my shoulder, this great daft gray lump of a lorry driver, and I watched my whole life carry on perfectly well without me in it. Angel called the man something. I couldn't hear what. But she called him something. Easy, like she was used to him. Like there'd been others, maybe, and you learn to call them all something. I'll tell you what went through me, standing there. Because it wasn't what you'd think. There was no big roaring rage. Not then. That came later. What I felt first, honest to God, was embarrassment. Pure, hot embarrassment. Like I'd walked into the wrong house. Because in that 1 second, I saw myself the way the whole barangay must have seen me the whole time. The daft old Kano, the walking wallet, the fella who thought he was the clever one. I saw the aunties totting me up. I saw Nanai's tears in the finished house. I saw Joy going quiet every time I mentioned marriage, and me thinking she was being shy. And it all reorganized itself, right there behind that pillar, into a shape I'd been refusing to let it make for 2 years. She was never in a hurry to marry me, because marrying me would have changed nothing for the better, and quite a lot for the worse. Why sign for one man's money when you can keep the arrangement open? I stood there long enough that a security guard started giving me the eye, this big, sweating foreigner staring at a coffee shop, and I turned and walked back out into the heat and the noise of the car park, and I was shaking. Not crying. Shaking. Like the engine of me was turning over and wouldn't catch. And it wasn't the jealousy that near put me on the floor. It was the arithmetic. Standing behind that pillar, it all landed at once, the whole bill, and I finally understood what I'd done. I stood there, and I did the sum I'd been refusing to do for 2 years. 2.2 million pesos on a house on land I could never own. About 30,000 pounds. $250,000 on the store in her name. 3,500. The tricycle for Jomar. 1,200. Nane's hospital. The best part of 900. And month after month after month of support. £200 a time for the better part of 2 years. Thousands more. I added it up later, properly, with a pen, in a hotel room that night. It came to just over £40,000. Just over £40,000. Everything. The whole of what a working life had left me. And here's the joke. Here's the thing that I laughed at. Alone in that hotel room. A horrible dry laugh with no fun in it. I never signed a thing. I got my way. I refused to marry her without a prenup, and by God I held that line. I never crossed it. Not once. And it protected nothing. Because the money never went out through a marriage. There was nothing for a prenup to guard. Every penny I lost, I gave. Freely. With a smile. As a boyfriend. A prenup only guards what a marriage would split. And I never let there be a marriage. So I sat there smugly guarding an empty room while the money strolled out the window in her name. In her brother's name. In her mother's name. In every name but mine. I built a wall to keep the enemy out the front door, and I carried the treasure out the back myself, in my own 2 hands, and handed it over, and thanked her for taking it. I did go and speak to her the next day. I'll not draw it out. I met her at the barangay, and she wasn't even that ashamed, which was almost a relief, in a way. No big performance. She was quiet and hard. She said the American was a friend. Then, when I didn't rise to it, she stopped bothering with that and just said the true thing, which was, "Terry, we are not married. You never wanted to marry me. What is it you think you have here?" And that was it, wasn't it? That was the whole 2 years in one sentence. What is it you think you have here? The house was hers, on her family's land, titled to them. The store was hers. The tricycle was Jomar's. And me, I was a boyfriend she'd never signed anything with, standing in a house I'd paid every peso for and owned not one brick of, with no claim, no contract, no marriage, no nothing. All that careful refusing to sign had made sure of that. I'd made myself a stranger with a receipt for nothing. I got the bus back to the city, watched the mountains and the sea go by that I'd once thought I was going to grow old in front of. And I flew home to Govan with about £6,000 left, and my works pension of £650 a month, back to the bed-sit, back to the kettle and the telly, and somebody else's wheelie bins out the window. I'm not going to sit here and tell you she's a monster, because that would be a lie, and I'm done with lies. I've told myself enough of them to last me. She was a poor woman, from a poor place, with a daughter to raise, and a family that would drown without her, and a rich-looking Scotsman fell out of the sky offering to make it all easier, and she took what was offered. She didn't hold a gun to my head. I did every single thing myself, with a smile, feeling clever. The poverty out there is real, and it's grinding, and it makes people do the sums that keep their family alive. And that's not the same as evil, even when it flattens you. I've had a long while in this bed-sit to work out the difference, and I think the difference matters. I phoned Davy when I got home. I owed him that after hanging up on him. I said, "You were right," and I told him the whole of it. And he didn't gloat, not for a second. He's a better man than me. He just said, "Aye." It's the kind ones that finish you, Terry. The nasty ones you see coming a mile off. And then he said the thing that stuck with me most of all. He said, the money was never the point of the money. You weren't buying a house. You were buying a family, and a reason to get up, and a way to not be that fella in the lay-by with the cold tea. And you can't buy those. Nobody can. They gave you a version of it on loan, and you paid for the whole thing outright, and now the loan's been called in. He was right. That's exactly what it was. I didn't lose £40,000 on a house and a shop and a tricycle. I lost it trying to buy my way out of being alone, and being alone's not a thing you can buy your way out of, it turns out. It just costs you everything you've got and leaves you exactly where you started, only lighter in the pocket and older in the face. Some nights I'm angry. I'll not pretend I've reached some calm, holy place about it, because I haven't. I'm a bitter Glaswegian, and I'll likely die one. Some nights I lie in that bedsit and I hate her, and I hate the American with his new watch, and I hate myself, worst of all. And other nights I think about Nane's face in that finished house, dry at last after all those leaking rainy seasons, and I think, well, at least somebody's warm and dry who wasn't before. At least the money did that, even if it did nothing I meant it to. Both of those are true, the hate and the strange bit of peace, and I've stopped trying to make them agree. Sheila taught me a person can hold two opposite things at once. Turns out, she taught me one useful thing after all. What I got wrong wasn't trusting her. It was thinking I understood where the danger was. I spent my whole life after Sheila guarding against a wedding ring, and the money never went near a wedding ring. It went out the way real money always goes out, a bit at a time for good reasons, to people you love, on things that made sense one at a time, and added up to everything. There's no prenup for that. There's no paper that protects you from your own generosity. The only thing that protects you is asking, before you hand a poor family the price of a house, whose name is on the deed, and what you'll be left holding if the love runs out. And I never asked, because I was too busy being proud of the paper I refused to sign. I'm 57. I've got £650 a month, and a bedsit, and a good tan that's long since faded. Angel'll not remember me in a year or two, and that's the bit that actually stings, if I'm honest. Not joy, not the money. The wean. She did nothing wrong. If you're out there thinking about it, and I know you are, I can see the numbers on these videos, thousands of you sitting in the dark like I was. Just ask the question I couldn't ask. Not is she after my money? That's the wrong question. That's the question that lets you feel clever. The right question is, if I give this freely, and it all goes wrong tomorrow, what have I actually got left? Ask it about the house. Ask it about the store. Ask it before, not after. That's all. That's the whole of what I know. That's Terry's story. He asked for the one thing a careful man asks for, and he held that line to the very end, and it protected nothing at all, because the loss never came through the door he was watching. That's the hard truth in almost every one of these stories. The danger is rarely where the fear is pointing. Terry wasn't foolish for loving. He wasn't even foolish for giving. He was foolish, by his own honest telling, for thinking a signature was the same as safety, and for never once asking what he'd be left holding if it ended. And notice what he refused to do, right at the end there. Refused to turn a poor woman in a poor place into a cartoon villain. That takes more strength than bitterness does. If Terry's story landed with you, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. And if you've got a story of your own, share it. Someone scrolling tonight needs to read it before they book the flight. Subscribe so the next fella gets his warning in time. Take care of yourselves out there. This has been Inside the Philippines Journals.